Welcome to the 2021 League of Women Voters Candidates Night. My name is Mary Genko, and I oversee voter services for the League of Women Voters of Darien. We always begin this annual event by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please stand, thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And then also, before we go any further, I need to point out the auditorium exits in the event of an emergency, and they're on the side of the stage and in the back. Each year, the League of Women Voters of Darien holds a candidates night so that voters can have an opportunity to ask questions of those running for elected office and hear how the candidates discuss and debate side by side. For the past several weeks, we've been asking voters to submit their questions for the candidates featured tonight. Thank you all for your questions. We've received over 80 to date. We're still accepting them tonight at LWV Darien CN 2021@gmail. All questions are reviewed by a bipartisan committee. Traditionally, at this time, we would read the ballot and ask all the candidates to stand and be recognized. Instead, this year, we would like to direct you to our voter's guide, which is now posted on our website and soon to be on the League of Women Voters 411 platform. In our voter's guide, you will see the names of 80 neighbors and friends, all living in Darien, who have offered their time and talent to public service. We thank them all. That's not a mistake, 80 town residents. While that includes the RTM districts, the result is that most voters will have an opportunity to voice their opinion in some way on about 33 candidates. Our voter's guide is the most comprehensive document available to understand who will be on the ballot in the order that they appear on the ballot. You will also find out how candidates responded to questions we've submitted to them. In the guide, there is no editorializing or editing of their responses whatsoever. Later this evening, we will be discussing our children's education, something near and dear to everybody's hearts in town. The voter's guide is adult education, which is near and dear to the League. Go to the polls prepared to express your opinion on all the offices. Even in uncontested races, casting a vote or not is informative. You should know this year we've accelerated our voter service activities to give you more time to review the facts and time to discuss your choices with others in the community. Finally, I have to ask you, at this time in our history, when many people across the political spectrum fear for the future of democracy, why wouldn't you support a nonpartisan organization whose mission is to educate the voters of the facts without spin, all with the mission of helping you make a more informed decision? So when you go to our website, lwvdarien.org, to check out our voter's guide, you will see at the top right-hand side a red button which says, "Join us." I hope you do. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our League moderator for tonight. Jean Rabineau is a member of the steering committee of the League of Women Voters of the Bridgeport area and has previously served as their membership chair, secretary, vice president, and president. She was elected in 2020 as one of Trumbull's 2 registrars of voter and is an attorney in private practice. Welcome, Jean.
Thank you. And I think you have my cheat sheet. Yeah, Mary, did you pick up my sheet of who goes in which order?
Apologies.
That's quite all right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the rules for tonight are very simple. Each candidate for each group of debates will get a 1-minute opening statement, a 1-minute closing statement, and however much time they want to take in response to the questions, except that I have been told when I have to end each segment of tonight's debates. So at some point, I will call for closing statements, whether the candidates have expended even amounts of time or unequal amounts of time in responding to your questions as submitted. For the opening and closing statements, candidates will be given a warning when they have 30 seconds left, when they have 15 seconds left, and when it is time to stop. For the answers to the questions, it's the candidate's choice. And if a candidate feels that his or her remarks need to be extended or somebody else's remarks need to be rebutted, at the end of each round of responses, they can raise their hand and I will call on them for rebuttal or extension. The candidates have drawn for the order in which they will respond to questions. For the candidates for first selectman, the opening statement will start with Ms. Ockman, then go to Ms. McNally, and then to Mr. No. The next question, the first question, will start with Ms. McNally, then Mr. No, then Ms. Ockman. The third one will start with Mr. No, then Ms. Ockman, Ms. McNally, and so on around each time, so that everybody will get a chance to go first somewhere. That being said, we start with the opening statements. Ms. Ockman, please.
Thank you to the Darien League of Women Voters and for tonight's debate, and thank you to the audience for joining us. This debate is an opportunity for us to discuss Darien's future, to decide which first selectman candidate has the experience, vision, and leadership to bring our community together and chart our course forward. During my tenure on the Board of Education, 5 years total and 3 as chair, I have proven my ability to bring necessary projects forward, champion initiatives that are innovative and constructive, and stand up for the needs of both our children and our community, all within fiscally responsible budgets. Darien's future needs energy, enthusiasm, and pragmatic open-mindedness, focused on results-based solutions. We face challenges that have gone unaddressed for years, and we have a real opportunity to plan for our future with fresh ideas, forward-thinking, and meaningful solutions. I look forward to answering your questions tonight because I know this dialogue is needed as we make a choice for a stronger, more vibrant Darien. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McNally.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks. Thank you, League of Women Voters, my fellow panelists and our audience. I'm Monica McNally, and I'm running for the position of First Selectman. Since moving here, I've been happy to volunteer in our community for the last 28 years. My husband Mark and I are proud to call Darien our home. This town really runs on volunteer spirit and effort. I've served on the RTM for 8 years, including 1 as Vice Chair of Rules and 3 as Chair of Public Works. I now serve on the Board of Selectmen. The blend of my nonprofit, private, and governmental experience uniquely qualifies me to lead our town. Hartford yearns to take control of Darien's destiny, and I promise to work tirelessly to preserve local control and local decision-making. I'm running with my team, John Zagrodsky and Marcy Minnick, and we are singularly committed to upholding Darien's continued success. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. No?
Hi, I'm Chris No. This is my 7th time running, but I served 4 years on the RTM, which was as a lawmaker, which was a great honor, and I learned a lot about how the town works and how it doesn't work. And right now, it's got a lot of things that don't work, and I don't see them getting repaired. So I continue to run. All these times that I've ran, I put out issues that I thought were important, things that we should be concerned with, and they seem to fall on deaf ears. So I continue to run because someone has to do it, and it's not, it's just not getting done. So we have an opportunity to, elect an independent at this point. I guess I'm not supposed to say what I am, but I'm running as an independent. I don't have party support, but I do have the ideas about what needs to be done and how to do it, and I'd like to have that opportunity.
Thank you all. First question starts with Ms. McNally. What is the most effective way to address repeated incidents of flooding and to provide assistance with flood mitigation? Should the town be involved in buyouts of homes severely damaged by floods? And if so, what standards should apply?
I think everyone in Darien, I think all of our hearts are filled with compassion for all of the residents that suffered so much. And it is a fact that our water courses and our drainage systems are not capable of handling the severity of the rainfalls that we experienced this summer. The latest study on flooding the town did after Sandy resulted in the 2009 study, in brief, identified choke points for water flow that causes flooding, including state roads, railways, and the expected results from widening these culverts. And since 80% of the water courses in Darien go through private property, the recommendations included working with private landowners to remove impediments. It also included widening certain channels, rebuilding retention walls, and constructing flood berms on others, and protecting private and public watersheds from development, and turning flood-prone homes into open spaces. So I say this because you can see how complicated this issue is. When these methods were brought forth, the work to get done included purchasing or condemning properties and invoking eminent domain to do other required work. And these projects did not receive the public support they needed to be approved. The post-storm analysis did lead to many changes, including strict new zoning rules and building codes that mitigate flooding from runoff from both new developments and redevelopments, and new mapping to identify critical areas. But we do need to do more. The Board of Selectmen has started the process. Town road culverts are being studied for additional capacity, and at Heights Road, we are looking for state approval for a water retention plan there. So this issue is at the top of my list to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. No?
This mine? Okay. Yeah, on flooding, well versed. My house floods. I got the highest water ever on September 2nd, about 2 o'clock in the morning. Of 2 feet. It was higher for probably the main reason was the new railing that the town installed over Stony Brook. It's like something to be on the side of I-95, and it just fills with debris, and then the metal rail itself becomes a dam. And something's got to get done, but I don't think the town's going to do anything about it. When I was on the RTM years ago, we approved $20 million to do repairs to correct flooding, and Dave Campbell, got elected, and he said that the flooding was like pushing a noodle. So I think we should all boil some water and push noodles around because it needs to get figured out. But I took the plan that was done by Malone and McBroom, and because it's private property that I own, and I implemented as much of Malone and McBroom's plan as I could on my own property at my own expense, and the road didn't flood at Old Kings Highway from 2007 until just July. And this most dangerous place, is from what I can tell, in town for fast-moving water over a roadway is at my house. I think everybody knows Renshaw Road floods, but that's like the Mississippi River. It's really slow. At my house, it would rip a car right off its wheels and take it away. So these things have to be looked at. We've been really lucky. When we went around in 2007, there was a woman who drove her car into Heights Road, and she had a baby in the back. And the car was floating, and then it filled with, she couldn't open the doors, and her story was terrifying. I was on the flooding committee at the time, and not everyone heard that testimony, but it was terrifying, and we really knew that something had to be done before someone got hurt. And of course, nothing got done. Dave Campbell took the $20 million and built a police station with it, and here we are. So personally, I did as much as I could, and now it's come to the forefront because we had some bad weather, and so perhaps this time something will get done. But I am in full belief that we've been lucky that no one's gotten hurt, gotten killed. We lost a police officer in Newtown, within the state. So the danger is real, and I don't think the cop was dumb. He was just, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, clearly. But any one of our residents could be there as well. So we have to address this time.
Thank you. Ms. Ackman?
So I think I've put out a plan on what we need to do on flooding. And first thing is we need to listen to our affected residents. We have homeowners and small businesses that have faced consistent flooding, and they deserve more than an insurance settlement, and they need the government to understand what they're facing. We do need to update our outdated plans. Darien has conducted multiple studies about flood risking in the past decades, but few of those studies have taken into account the increased severity of climate change. And properties that were labeled at being risked in flooding in a 25-year storm have now been flooded multiple times in one summer. We have heard that these storms will continue, and they are not happening once every 200 years or 500 years. We need to fortify our town infrastructure. In 2016, the Western Connecticut Council of Governments conducted a major report on flooding in southwestern Connecticut, which found the probability of future flooding in Darien highly likely and the maximum probable extent of flooding extreme. Unfortunately, that report did not spur significant mitigation efforts at the town level. I believe we need to invest in upgrading drainage culverts, underpasses, and riverbanks. We also need to fight for state and federal support. Major mitigation projects are expensive. With 98% of the tax burden on property owners, it's time that we need to push our federal representatives for some of that infrastructure money that's coming down from the federal government. We also need to push the Democratic leadership in Hartford to send us funding and bonding packages that we deserve as a town here in Darien. No Darien resident or business ought to be flooded out multiple times a year. Part of the question was, should we be buying out properties? There are FEMA regulations that set those standards, but our answer shouldn't be to buy people out and ask them to leave town. I believe in open spaces, I believe in doing what's needed, but I also believe it's time for the town to take on this important issue. And I believe this is a top priority.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to rebut or extend? All right, the next question will go to Mr. No first. What can you do to resolve the stalemate of the seemingly abandoned development project in the Palmers-owned half of Norotan Heights Center?
What a great question. All right, so the last election, I said this is one of the points that I said we should be talking about, and it fell on totally deaf ears. Okay, so we were going into three major projects in town, and I said, Stanford had a hole in the middle of town for 30 years. Somebody's got to remember me saying that, because a lot of people responded to it, and they said it was more than 30 years. But what happened, it was just a disaster for Stanford. So, and now it's a disaster for us in Darien. I mean, we have, everybody sees what's going on. But what I proposed was putting together some heads and thought. And one of the things was, if a job loss financing, would Darien, with its ability, help the property owner achieve proper financing to keep the project moving? It's in our interest. This is what's happened. This thing has languished so long. The owners could lose interest. Some other builder could come along, Avalon perhaps, and come with a different plan. But right now, we have an approved plan, and it's a good plan. It's a really good plan, and it should be underway, and it's not. Had we put together some kind of board 2 years ago where we would have tried to just put down every bad scenario that could have happened, what we would do, what we'd be able to do, when we would have powers to take over, which they would, whoever's going to do this type of work, we're trying to avoid a 30-year hole in the middle of town, and that's serious. So something should have been put in place. I think Palmer's. I think the town should use its might to help them get the finance they need. That doesn't mean we're going to finance the whole project. These projects move along in stages. So you got phase 1, phase 2. Even if we gave them or helped them get the phase 1 money, and then later on, as things start rolling again, then some other banker's going to come in and they're going to pick up the phase 1 and they're going to do 2, and it's all going to roll together, and the whole project's going to happen. But what is happening at Palmer's is what I predicted could happen, and we should have put things in place, and it didn't happen. And that's why I continue to run again.
Ms. Ochman.
So the good news is, to my knowledge, the Palmer's project has financing again, and that project will get back underway. And so I think we should be excited about that. I do think that what we really want to spur in town is responsible building development. These projects came online at the same time due to some delays in projects. That always happens, and we should be aware of that. That's one of the results of rebuilding and having development. So I'm very happy that the Palmer's project will be back underway. I look forward to that. I don't think it's my business to announce the financier, but to my knowledge, they have built in town and they've been good developers and will continue along that way. I hope that project gets put together. And I think what it probably is there's probably some work on P&Z that can help maybe with shielding and stuff like that when projects go up, to kind of help make sure that that neighborhood is protected, or any neighborhoods in the future should there be delays in development. But I'm very happy the project's back underway, and I think if we have responsible business development in Darien, we are best served by that and keeping our town vibrant.
Okay, Ms. McNally?
I echo what Mrs. Ackman said. The project is going before planning and zoning at the end of October, so it is moving forward. I understand people's frustration with the length of time it took, but all of these projects, whether it's Corbin or Federal or Palmer's or Park or whatever new project comes along, these projects are vetted through the Planning and Zoning Department, and the process takes a while. Yes, Palmer's is taking a little bit longer, and I think everybody would say that we appreciate everybody's patience. But in my opinion, this system works. This will get on board. You know, Federal will be built out by the end of next year, so part of the development over there will be completed, and I thank everybody for their patience.
All right. Is there anybody who wishes to extend a rebut on this one? All right, the next question goes to Ms. Ackman first. Would you support Darien instituting a tree ordinance that would create a plan to preserve or regenerate greenery in town?
So I've been vocal about the fact that I think Darien needs a sustainability town. I think we're seeing the interplay between our environment and our infrastructure. I do think we need updated records. I think we have a 25-year-old tree list for developers to choose from and plant, and then we end up in situations where neighbors and developers are debating what should be planted. Well, that's where government can best serve people. We can update 25-year-old plans, we can work with the newest information on the environment, and we can kind of calm those concerns because we've done our work. I do think, again, responsible developers want to work with the town, but they need to be given the information that is most up to date. So I would support the idea of a sustainability plan across town. I do think that we have some concerns about trees coming down in multiple neighborhoods near the railroad, and those are real concerns. I've been out to those neighborhoods. I've seen what it will do to those neighborhoods. We are best served when we look holistically at what is going on with our environment. As a coastal town, we are subject to the environment in ways that other towns are not, and so I really think that we should take this on because it will lead to better results for all town residents.
All right, Ms. McNally?
Yes, I would support a tree advocacy advisory council. If that was underneath the beautification committee, that would be terrific. I think that as everybody drove up today, you saw the trees that were planted at Town Hall over the weekend by the pollinator pathway. I think that the trees in general in Darien are loved by everyone, but I think there also is a fine balance between protecting the trees and maintaining a balanced relationship with Eversource, and that's I think that's just a smart way to go forward. Thank you.
Mr. No?
You know, the tree issue is, and I've probably planted more trees than I've cut down. But, you know, we need to have power. You know, when we have too many trees, like Greenwich, the power goes out and it doesn't come back on for forever. So we need to be realistic. We need to clear the power lines. You know, as far as some kind of panel that suggests, and I think people should have free reign to plant the trees that they want to plant. I don't think we should be telling them what trees to plant. I remember years ago, I sat in on an environmental protection meeting, and Dave Keating was ordering someone to plant Norway maples, which are invasive. So the stupidity is deep in this town. So I think we should allow owners to plant whatever tree they like.
All right, does anybody have anything further on that question? All right, next question goes to Ms. McNally first. Given the recent flooding, should the town be reevaluating the proposed plans to renovate Pear Tree Point Beach?
I think Pear Tree Point Beach is a jewel in town. I think it's in disrepair. It needs improvement. And that project, I would like to hit the reset button on. I would like to see neighbors, community members involved in the committee. I think that's an asset that we're all proud of, and perhaps dividing the project into three, focusing first on the boat ramp, and then on the parking lot, and then on any permanent structures that will be constructed might be the way to go forward. But yes, that's a really important asset for us, and I think everybody in town loves it, and yes, I think we should go forward on that.
Mr. No?
Pear Tree Beach is, it's not a park, it's just a beach. It's a boat ramp that doesn't work right. It's a boat club. You know, the big plan that was proposed is an absolute disaster. I was down at the beach in August, I guess, and there were 7 spare spaces. And fortunately, I didn't arrive with my truck and trailer to launch my boat because there was no place to park my truck and trailer. There is no designated truck and trailer parking at a park with a boat ramp. I mean, that's the only place you'll find that is in Darien. Most people that I've spoken to at the beach do not want the big plan. They think it's a disaster. I know it is 100%. I wouldn't recommend that at all. I think what people want, that I've heard, is they would like to have showers, you know, men's and women's showers. You know, years ago, I helped the guys at Norotan Bay just put in it was just a 4x4 deck to stand on with a post with a shower head coming out of it so people could rinse off coming out of the water. And everyone loved that. So even if that was our most minimum thing, that would be a godsend, because you get all that sticky salt water and you have to climb back in your car. You know, it's not good for your cars. It's just yucky. So even just something as simple as that would make a lot of people happy. But you know, originally there was 2 plans. The one where they were going to renovate the building that we have and do this giant thing. And because nothing is done, that means they're both still on the table. So the people who are opposed to this really need to remain opposed to it and don't let it go.
Ms. Ockman?
So what's gone down at Pear Tree Point with that project is indicative of our lack of planning for town-owned properties. I've met with the neighbors there, I followed those meetings, and what I would really say, the problem is that we need a 5-year capital plan outlook. We've done that on the school side. It's allowed us to socialize plans, to have input, and people can predict what the next project is. Now, there are times we've had to shift priorities because everyone has to be nimble, but that's really what the town needs for all of its town-owned properties. What are our plans for Pear Tree Point? What are our plans for Cherry Lawn, for Highland Farm? Can we space it out? Do we understand what types of investments will need to be due? What does that look for our bonding capabilities? And what does that look for operational costs that will have to come out of plans if we want to run town services down there? To me, flooding at Pear Tree has always been an issue, but the real thing that has gone wrong down there is this project got wildly out of control because we really didn't understand what we were trying to accomplish. Our beaches make us unique as a coastal town, and we really do need to honor that. It's one of the reasons why people move to town. But I think the larger question really is, how are we really managing our town-owned properties? I have the experience in managing multiple properties, 7 schools, and I really think I can help bring that experience and that planning over to the town side.
Okay. Anything further on? Yes.
Yes. I've heard my opponent mention many times, once tonight, but elsewhere, that the town doesn't have a plan, and that is, that's just not accurate. The town has a blueprint. This is the plan of conservation and development. This is what we use in town. Every department has a plan, okay? This is 10 years worth of forward thinking that was put together by every resident in this town. We have capital plans, we have plans by departments. They're required to do this. So we have a plan for just about everything.
So I would like to rebut.
Go
So
ahead.
that was the survey that went out to town residents. What I'm really talking about is a capital plan that's included in the budget 5 years out so we can predict spending, which is very different from the plan Mrs. McNally is talking about.
All right, thank you all on that one. The next question is going to go to Mr. No first. Zoning decisions affect property values. As first selectman, how would you advocate for local control in zoning? And I believe they were thinking about affordable housing in this context.
Oh, sorry.
You know, affordable housing is not Darienne's problem. It's imposed on us by the state. You know, there's plenty of illegal apartments all over town that aren't counted. I wish we could find a way to count them and make them legal, because that might help alleviate some of our shortfall. The zoning laws were put in place. I think most of our zoning laws were designed in the 60s. You know, you can't have a clothesline in Darien, all those silly things. But you know, you see some developers who just run over our zoning laws. You know, the project was proposed for downtown originally came with a 7-story building, which I thought was insane. I think the zoning laws that we have are good, and they should be applied evenly to everyone. And that doesn't happen here. And so, if I was first selectman, some of these plans that I think are just so over the top, that belong in Stamford or Norwalk, not our little town, I would fight it tooth and nail. I wouldn't be championing them at all. I mean, what's proposed for downtown Corbin Drive, and I don't think it's the right thing. I just don't see it at all. So I think we have laws that are in place that need to be followed, and that's what we need to do.
Okay, Ms. Ackman?
So could you just repeat the question?
Yes. Zoning decisions affect property values. As first selectman, how would you advocate for local control in zoning? And then there's a reference to affordable housing specifically.
Sure. So zoning and planning and zoning, their authority comes directly from the state. So really, I think what we are talking about is affordable housing, and how do you have a first selectman who advocates on behalf of Darien? And if that's the question, I'm happy to answer. I will say there's been much discussed bills that were proposed in Hartford. I believe those bills went too far. Those characterizations were broad and simplified very complicated issues. Those bills did not pass. We now have a choice. We either leverage our local talent and come up with a plan, which we must by law, or we kind of wait and cower in fear of what might have been and what could come. I believe Darien has the thought makers and decision makers to be on the cutting edge of every issue, including this issue. So I think that we can do it best, and I would challenge us to come up with a plan and demonstrate that we can do it better, rather than just saying, oh no, can you believe what someone was going to do to us? I really believe in forward thinking and being on the cutting edge of those decisions. One of those examples of when we've gotten it right and we've done it well, if everyone remembers the Allen O'Neill houses, when we redeveloped those into the Heights, that actually increased property values of the whole area, and they were good developments serving people. So I think that we can really do this and do it well. I will say I'm the only member sitting up here who has been to Hartford to testify on behalf of Darien as a locally elected official. Those were against bills brought by Democrats. I am a Democrat. I don't mind if I am testifying for or against a Democrat or Republican. I'm going to testify what is in the best interest of Darien. And I was very proud after that testimony to receive support from several key elected Republicans and Democrats for representing Darien well. I will continue to do that on behalf of Darien and in the best interest of Darien.
Ms. McNally.
So I'm sure everybody remembers this spring, several bills were brought before Hartford to look at zoning, and one of the groups was Desegregate Connecticut. This bill, as Ms. Ockman says, did not pass. This bill would require mandatory zoning reform to allow 4 or more units on 50% of land to be developed within a half a mile of train stations or a quarter mile of the Main Street corridor. This would be as of right, which means there would be no input from residents regarding the multifamily that goes up on their property or the property next door to them. No concern for the environment, no concern for traffic or safety or anything like that. I will work tirelessly with other like-minded town leaders to push back on this and maintain our town's independence. I think that when people move to Darien, there's an implicit contract that what they moved here for, they're going to keep. This is a town that deserves input from its residents, and it will have an impact on your property values if this type of zoning does go through. Thank you.
Can I rebut?
Yes, Royal, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sure. I find my opponent talking about what was and what failed, not what could be. And I think that's where we need to really focus. I also think it's important not only to talk to like-minded town leaders, but to talk to all town leaders. I mean, if this is something coming down to the state, it's going to be important to talk to people who agree with you and disagree with you, so you know how to advocate on behalf of Darien best. We can't have insular conversations. We need to have broad-based conversations and kind of move away from implicit types of contracts or thoughts. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I would say that we have made strides in Darien. We've made strides in our zonings, regulations. We just recently increased our inclusionary zoning from 12% to 14%. This beats the state's 10% requirement. This is what we're doing here with local control. We eliminated the minimum size of apartments. This is proactive movement on our parts. But these are decisions that are made in town by our local elected officials, not in Hartford, and I will fight for that all the way.
All right, Mr. No, anything further? All right, I would like a time check, please. I would like to see the time for all 3 candidates. All right, thank you. All right. There is a follow-up question that was asked that relates, and it's going to start with Ms. Ockman first. Do you support affordable housing for those with developmental disabilities being included in all Darien housing plans?
I think that we need to make sure that we have a variety of types of affordable housing, and that includes housing for our seniors, that includes housing for developmentally disabled, that includes housing based purely on income. I would be concerned if what we did was have one type of affordable housing or require one type of affordable housing, blocking out a best laid plan for others. So I would like to be inclusive on this, and I don't think that it would be wise to restrict or mandate any particular type of housing. I would worry what that would even mean legally in terms of some of our state statutes.
Okay, Ms. McNally?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Yes. Do you support affordable housing for those with developmental disabilities being included in all Darien housing plans?
So yes, the Corbin project has 12 units that are being built, that were built, that are out on East Lane. It's a very successful program, 2 different buildings, 12 residents in total. This was put forth by David Genovese, and it was a very successful plan, and it's being modeled elsewhere in town, or elsewhere in other towns. But I do think diversity of housing is important, and that does include seniors, it does include families, it does include developmentally disabled. So yes, I'm in support of this.
Mr. No?
I would say no. I think it's up to a builder to figure out how to develop their property the best as they can. But if you think back years ago, Yvonne Klein built a little small facility for 6 challenged kids, and it was came before the RTM. I was the only one who abstained to vote. Everyone voted for it because I knew that the town council was incompetent, and we wound up getting I think half a point or 1 point where we should have got a whole lot more. But town council was making himself $1 million a year defending town from affordable housing. So our first attempt at building affordable housing and collecting some points on it, we got nothing because of John Wayne Fox. So, we have enough rules, but I think in the back of our mind, we should want to, as Yvonne did, to build housing where we can for challenged people. I think we're a very lucky community where we're not struggling to eat, and we can look out for our weaker members, and that is something that we should do. And as I did when I was in high school, I stuck up for some challenged kids were getting bullied, and I had to pretty much take on a whole table of bullies. But anyhow, so I'm still looking out for those guys.
Okay, anything further on that? All right, I'm going to ask one last question, and then we're going to go to closing statements. So this will be the last question. Do you believe that the Board of Finance, the RTM, and the other town boards should have to obtain public financial data by way of a Freedom of Information request? And this one goes to Ms. McNally first.
Absolutely not. I think that the town government, I think that all of these groups should be able to work together, and if you're in that type of an adversarial relationship, that's not healthy for town government, and it's not healthy probably for you personally. So no, I don't think that's good at all. No.
Okay. Mr. No?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Certainly. Do you believe that the Board of Finance, the RTM, and the other town boards should have to obtain public financial data by way of a Freedom of Information request?
Well, there might be a time when you would want that, but just to put it out there broadly, it seems to be something that would get abused. I mean, there's already enough abuse of regulations and power in town, and that would just open up a whole nother Pandora's box. I would say no.
All right. Ms. Ockman.
So I probably have the most experience up here with the Freedom of Information Act, and I think that it is the opposite of what Mrs. McNally was implying. It is actually a great resource for people to have access to information, and they can't have things kept from them from government. I think there are times when town boards are working on projects together. I also think there are times when there are groups doing discrete work, and someone has an interest and wants people to stop the work that they're doing and planned on and would like information. This has actually already been decided. It's a matter of law, so I think we have to be very, very careful. We have received legal counsel's advice that this is the proper way to do things. I believe in keeping Darien on the proper path of doing things. Freedom of information requests are not adversarial at all. They are actually a very free-flowing and sacred part of the trust between the community and the government. So I think, one, we have to go with legal counsel's advice. I think also we should be championing the Freedom of Information Act, and we should really look at it as an avenue in which all citizens can receive information because the government is of and for the people.
Thank you all. I'm not going to take rebuttal because we're going to the closing statements. By luck of the draw, the first close will go to Mr. No, the second to Ms. Ockman, the third to Ms. McNally. 1 minute, please. Timers. Mr. No.
All right, 60 seconds. Okay, so here we are. We've had a real struggle of 2020. We lost our town clerk, Karen Diller. Really sad moment. Such a wonderful woman. We lost Mark Thorne, and got to throw out some prayers for his lovely wife, Barbara Thorne. But we just move on and keep trudging along and try to get things done, try to make the right decisions. And, I'm a retired contractor. I worked my own business for 18 years. I wrote a lot of checks and paid a lot of bills, and I hired and fired a lot of people. And what I see going on in Darien, there's a bunch of people who need to be get pushed out and moved on, and we need to hire new, including town council.
Thank you. Ms. Ockman.
So Darien, this is our moment. We can choose the status quo for flooding, pedestrian safety, emergency response, and basic infrastructure work, and continue to maintain that good enough is, well, good enough. Or we can choose leadership that brings forward solutions to the challenges we face and ideas for capitalizing on the many opportunities before us. The job of the first selectman is not an entry-level position. Our first selectman should be experienced and ready day one to get needed initiatives up and running and to deliver results, be willing to represent and champion Darien dynamically, and be actively invested and engaged in building a strong and thriving, resilient community. I have a history of concrete plans and proven solutions for our children, and I am prepared to bring that same focus, results-based pragmatism, and integrity to Town Hall. I am asking for your vote for Tara Ockman on Tuesday, November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McNally.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting us and all of you viewers for watching tonight. The purpose of tonight's debate was to highlight the differences between the candidates, but for a moment, and rather than highlight our differences, I'd like to bring us together. I'm convinced that any of the people debating tonight, if elected, will work hard to help move Darien toward where their vision points. In my 28 years in town and my 9 on the RTM and now on the Board of Selectmen, I have spoken with many residents. I know what most of you want. You want Darien to grow and prosper in ways in which we can all share. I also know most of us do not want Darien to lurch left or veer right, which will change the town we love too much. I want to keep the Darien dream alive for you, for your children, and for their children. This is my vision. Please vote McNally, Zagrodzky, and Minnick. Commitment and local decision-making matters in this election. Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay.
There's some more questions.
Board of Selectmen, excellent.
And you might want to pull some.
I've pulled a couple that we didn't even get to ask, so yes. Okay.
That's for the board.
Fair.
A bunch of trash about me, I take it up.
Sure.
And that's not, like, we didn't.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to need to get the name tags up.
2 months later, it was dead.
Okay.
So Clara, I'm in the
It's Mr. Minnick first.
Mrs.
Mrs. I'm sorry.
That's
I take
okay.
it back.
That's
then
okay.
Mr. Zagrodzky,
Yep.
Ms. Newman, and Mr. Burke. Can't be as sad as mine. Mine set off the passenger alarm.
Mine either. You're Marcy? Yep. John, you want to get closer? We can share a mic.
Yeah, I wonder if we should move that microphone between.
To share 2-on-2, yeah.
Yeah.
Such a.
All right.
Is there,
Set.
can someone do a
Yes.
sound thing? Is this okay? Or do I have to really maneuver it? Move it?
We have to move it when we're
Okay.
talking, I think. How about this side? Can you hear this side okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The timers for Ms. Minnick, please raise your hands. All right, for Mr. Zagrodzky? All right, for Ms. Newman? And for Mr. Burke? Okay, so you know who your timers are. You've already drawn numbers. The rules are exactly the same as they were for the first debate. That being said, we start the opening statement with Ms. Minnick.
Sure. Ready? Good evening. My name is Marcy Minnick, and I'm running for Darien Board of Selectmen. I'm grateful for this opportunity tonight, and I want to thank all the women at League of Women Voters who made this event happen. A little bit about me. My husband, Emmanuel, and I have been in Darien for 11 years. We have 3 children in the Darien school system, and I've been a lifetime resident of the state of Connecticut. I attended Sacred Heart University, where I received my MBA, and my husband and I are both small business owners. I am the CEO of my family's multi-generational manufacturing company located in Milford, and my husband owns a small moving and logistics company here in Darien. I currently am serving as the VP of Manufacturing CT, where I chair the legislative committee. This role often takes me to Hartford to encourage policy that helps manufacturers and small businesses run successfully here in Connecticut. I am currently a sitting board member for Inspirica, and I lead 2 Girl Scout troops and serve as several years as an Oxbridge PTO social chair. Currently, I'm serving my 2nd term on the RTM, where I sit on the Planning, Zoning, and Housing. And I'm excited to be here, and I look forward to answering your questions tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Zagrodzky.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Zagrodzky, and it's a real pleasure to be here, and I thank everyone for their efforts in pulling together this event tonight. Here I am in front of a microphone again. When I said last December that I would be stepping down from the Board of Finance, I thought maybe that meant retirement, but not so much. It's actually a real privilege to be involved in town service. I had an email today saying, well, thank you for your service, and I thought, actually thank you. What a privilege it is to stand here or sit here and talk to people like this and share our vision about where we think this town should go and what the most important issues are that we face and how we would address them. And frankly, to be part of a conversation and then maybe to be part of a governing body to help address those, it is a real privilege. In addition to that enthusiasm, I bring a lot of experience. You know where I've been as chairman of the Board of Finance for the last 6 years, members of Public Works and Oxbridge Billing Committees, Darien Town and Police Pension Boards, president of the Historical Society. I've seen a lot in this town, and I hope to bring both my enthusiasm for government and solutions, as well as my participation elsewhere to town service.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Newman.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for holding this event tonight. Having attended this evening in years past, I appreciate their diligent work to give the voters of Darien more information on each candidate in the election. I sit here tonight as your only incumbent candidate this year for the Board of Selectmen. I have worked incredibly hard and effectively with residents and other elected officials, regardless of party affiliation, in this town over the past 2 years. Keeping our residents safe and well-informed will always be at the top of my agenda. I have volunteered and helped lead at our town's COVID clinics and organized food drives. I've represented all of you as the Board of Selectmen representative to the Thriving Youth Task Force. And currently I'm serving on the town's Pedestrian Safety Committee and will be serving as the Board of Selectmen's representative on the committee for the exciting Hinley, Royal, and Home school building projects that are about to begin. I care about all of us. I have spent the past few months talking to residents about the flooding issue in particular. It's time we take action to protect them and to give them the solutions they need.
Thank you. Mr. Burke?
Good evening. Thank you to the League for sponsoring this event. This is my fourth, and I'm truly appreciative. And thank you to all of you at home who are taking the time to watch. For this board to be high-functioning, I believe it must be populated by critical thinkers who are informed, unafraid to be accountable, communicative, and motivated to get things done. I have an actual record of service in Darien espousing those qualities. As a member of the RTM and the Board of Education, I examined, vetted, and passed town and school budgets. As a member of the Board of Education, I negotiated teacher contracts, chaired our policy committee, worked collaboratively with other stakeholders, safely navigating the COVID pandemic, and becoming one of the first districts in the country to fully reopen. I also helped lead the effort to get important capital projects completed, including the long-stalled lights installation at the high school. I have a demonstrated record of effective community service, and I'm fully ready to serve on the Board of Selectmen. Thank you.
Thank you all four. First question will go to Mr. Zagrodzky first. Given recent flood events, should the town be considering a more frequent review of some or all of the plan of conservation and development?
Like some of the other speakers tonight, I'd start off by expressing empathy with residents and businesses that suffered from flooding in these last two storms, but actually floods that we've experienced in the past. It's devastating. I actually live on Crimmins Road, and so the folks that got the worst of the flooding, and I'm not talking about a couple inches, I'm talking 5 feet, those are friends and neighbors of mine, and a lot of the pictures of those houses you could actually take from my yard. In terms of our approach, I think the intensity of these storms, the regularity, all that suggests that we need to have active and continually updated planning efforts with regard to what we're going to do about flooding. But as Mrs. McNally said in her comments, this is an extremely complicated issue. It's not something that we can address easily or quickly. We kind of know what the levers are, and they're around significant investments in flood mitigation. There are investments in resilience, both in town or in residents and as well as businesses. It's seeking state and federal aid to assist us. It's coordinating with other geographies. Flooding is not just a Darien problem, it's a geographic problem, and there's lots of water issues outside of Darien that are contributing to our problems. And so unless we have a holistic approach that really takes all of that into account, it's a waste of time and money to focus on any one thing. So I would start the process with addressing flooding with a holistic view of all those different factors to try to make sure we have a clear understanding of what we can and can't do. And then we're going to have to wrestle with expense. These are not a couple $1 million projects to fix flooding in this town. This is a lot of money. And if we're going to do that, we're going to have to not only come up with the right plans, but we're going to have to sell them and sell them thoughtfully to a lot of residents that are going to have to pay those taxes.
All right, Ms. Newman.
We have failed our residents by waiting too long to address these concerns. We need to keep our residents safe. These flooding issues in town are serious and they need to be addressed immediately. Our conservation plans we need to look very carefully at the areas in town that have suffered some severe flooding, and we need to look at what the studies in the past have recommended. These recommendations were first presented to the town by the Flood Mitigation Strategy Committee over 10 years ago and by the firm Malone & McBroom, and they should be implemented. We need to be carefully looking at our weather patterns, but we also need to be looking at the effects that we've had over the years. Recommendations for working on the serious areas include maintaining watercourse channels that are critical for floodwaters, allocating additional staff for floodplain management, supporting the town purchase of properties within the floodplain in conjunction with FEMA grant funds, separating the Flood Erosion Control Board from the Environmental Protection Commission, and doing site-specific work in locations that are most affected by the flooding and involve additional channel widening, dredging, and increasing culvert size and replacing bridges. We do need to be very careful, and we need to look at the places that have been severely, severely affected, and we need to update the plans and start implementing them immediately.
Mr. Burke.
When I was on the RTM, I approved 2 flood studies. I was disappointed that the studies produced results that the First Selectman office decided not to enact almost in any way or form. I was disappointed that they disbanded a flood mitigation committee after those reports were created. We need to act. I don't necessarily think those plans that were done nearly a decade ago are relevant, but what I do know is this. When I sat on the Board of Education, I vetted and studied contractor plans all the time. I did it as a volunteer. I do it in my professional life as a litigator. I am ready to solve this problem. Let's get the experts together and let's get this done.
Ms. Minnick?
Sure. I can say that the flooding issue is very personal to me. I own a 33,000 square foot manufacturing facility in Milford, and we also had significant damage to our property. We had millions of dollars worth of equipment and machinery that was flooded at the exact same events that have occurred here in Darien. This is not a Darien alone issue. This is a statewide issue, and I can certainly say that I am empathetic and I can sympathize because this certainly was not something that we could forecast. Going forward, we can come up with a plan, and we do need to come up with a plan. There are several sources that we can try to look at. One of the things we need to really do is take a look at what exactly was the cause of this. Darien has 5 waterways that travel into our town, and lots of floodplains. With that being said, we need to take a deeper look at some of the regulations that we have with our zoning issues. Right now, we're currently at a 50-year regulation. Maybe we need to move it up to a 100-year regulation. We need to do more frequent cleanouts of our drainage. I agree with that completely. Currently, right now, we're only doing it annually. Possibly, we need to do it more frequently. And we need to create a committee. We need to really take a deep dive and take a good look at to see what exactly is causing this and what areas are salvageable. That's it.
All right. Does anybody want to extend a rebut?
Quick rebuttal?
Yes, sir.
So again, because this is such an important issue, there has been a lot of study, and we may need some more adjustments, but we need to act. We need to do something. I think it's cold comfort for the people whose houses and properties are continually flooded and damaged that their government is going to look at the problem. We need to do more than look. We need to act.
Anything further? Okay. The next question is going to start with Ms. Newman. What can government do to incentivize homeowners and businesses to keep their waterways free of debris?
What can Darien do to incentivize homeowners to keep their properties free of debris? Well, I think in this particular year where the flooding has been so incredibly, phenomenally devastating for so many of our residents, I think everyone is acutely aware of what has happened. And I think we need to do a better job with communicating to our residents the effects of the properties, where the trees are fallen in the basins behind their home. We need to be very careful about what they're putting by them, whether it's someone had a wheelbarrow, or they're dumping leaves or tree limbs. We need to be very proactive with getting this information out to our residents with communication. I think we have not focused on that for a long time, and we've seen the effects of very clogged waterways for the residents this summer.
All right. Mr. Burke.
So we're elected to be leaders in this town. 87% of us have college educations. The median property value is $1.4 million. The median income is $250,000. Why can't we go to these people directly and knock on their door and say, what aren't you doing, and how can we help you? It can't be just government punishing. It's got to be government and leaders working with these people to discover what the impediments are to taking care of their property and cleaning their debris and being useful citizens. So let's go door to door and resolve this.
Ms. Minnick?
Sure, I could just elaborate on what Mr. Burke said. I agree. I think the Darien residents are highly educated and able to take a look at what their responsibilities are as members of society. I think it's imperative that we continue to educate our residents and let them know that these are major problems that are attributing to the flooding issues that are happening in town.
Mr. Zagrodzky.
In front of my house after the flood, there was a surfboard. There was a staircase. There were branches. There were all kinds of things, and none of them belonged to anyone that we knew that lived in the area. I point that out because, yes, it's important for people to keep waterways clear, but the reality is there was so much water. It was such an overwhelming amount of water that even some simple things like, well, I cleared my lawn clippings, or I didn't put a pile of bricks next to the waterway. This water overwhelmed all of that. And so I think we're going to have to, yes, encourage people to clear their waterways. I would remind you how difficult it has been with even a very public campaign to get people to lock their cars, right? How long have we been doing that? How many articles in the paper? How many times have public officials said, would you please lock your cars? So imagine how effective it's going to be to have a big campaign to say, would you please keep your waterways clear, right? We're going to need to think a little bit more expansively than those sort of, mildly effective exhortations. And I think having a careful plan, I would challenge Mr. Burke a little bit when he says we have to act now. There's a couple things you can do on flooding in terms of town maintenance, which, by the way, if you talk to town maintenance staff and let them describe to you the work that they do to try to keep those assets clear, it's non-trivial. But I think a longer-term, thoughtful plan that takes into account all the factors that I described before is going to be very important. Do not kid yourself. The level of expenditure we're going to have to undertake to make a big dent in these problems with questionable effectiveness long-term, again, not trivial. I don't want to take an immediate step into something that serious.
All right, anything further on that question? All right, the next one goes to Mr. Burt first. What can you do to protect and increase open and green space in our town?
Could you repeat that, please? Could you repeat it?
What can you do as a member of the Board of Selectmen to protect and increase open and green space in our town?
Our town has a certain amount of property that it currently owns, which we have dominion and control over. There is private property which we cannot control. I think one thing we have to do is look at our public properties, whether it's Edgerton or the Highland property or Pear Tree Point, to ensure that we preserve green space there. I agree with the tree decision that was discussed earlier. I don't know that Eversource is motivated by anything other than profit when they are trying to cut down our trees. But we have to be custodians of the lands that we own.
Okay, Ms. Minnick?
Currently, Darien is 98% at capacity of development. Preserving our green space is certainly a priority for, I believe, every Board of Selectmen candidate that's up here right now. The tree issue that we're hearing about, yes, certainly is of major concern, but so is the safety of our residents as we're walking past sidewalks and we're finding that the sidewalks are being lifted up because roots are coming through. I'm a huge component of one up, one down. You take a tree down, you put a tree up. I support this campaign. I will continue to support this campaign. I'm certainly an advocate for open space, and I'm certainly an advocate of continuing to build on that.
Mr. Zagrodzky.
In terms of protecting and increasing green space, I think to protect our green space, simply keeping the green space open and clear and maintained. I'm not sure what else you want to do other than to let nature flourish. In terms of increasing green space, that's pretty hard to do. As was said, the town is pretty well developed. I suppose we could acquire more green space. I think the Ziegler property is available for $140 million, but given plans I've heard for flooding and a lot of other things, I'm not sure even Darien could afford all that. So it's not an easy task, I think, to protect our green space and something that we need to pay attention to. It's also a very difficult task to increase our green space in a town that's as developed as this one is. That's why we should protect and preserve what we have.
Ms. Newman.
Darien owns very little undeveloped property. As everyone has said, we are a town of 98% development. I believe we should look at our properties and focus on some recommendations that we've outlined in the Master Parks Plan that we created a few years ago. And in order to effectively use our properties and make sure everyone's able to enjoy them, we need to look at our existing field allocation policy and expand it to do a field use study and understand what we have and how we use it and what we need in order to make sure that we are effectively using all of our properties. We have incredible space at Cherry Lawn. We have incredible space at Highland Park. It's important that everyone is able to use those properties. We want everyone to be able to use them, not just some people. Whether it's soccer for young kids or yoga for seniors, these are properties that all of Darien owns, and they belong to the residents, and we want to make sure that they're able to use all of them.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody who wants to say anything further on this? All right, the next question starts back with Ms. Minnick. Do you intend to continue the 4-day work week for town hall employees?
I believe the current First Selectman implemented the 4-day work week at Town Hall as a COVID precaution. It was a way for her to keep the amount of people passing through limited. At this point, I believe it's working. Many industries have gone that way. I think now we will start to put more of our services online. Hopefully, we won't need the passages to go in. But if it is needed, and we're finding that it's a inconvenience for our residents, I certainly think we can consider going back to a 5-day.
Mr. Zagrodsky?
I tend to believe in trying to be prescriptive about what I want and less prescriptive about how to get there. And so I think instead of focusing on whether the 4-day work week works, I would actually test to see whether what we need to get done as town government, and that's both execution of town services, providing services to residents in time frames and at hours that are convenient for them, that sort of thing. If we're doing that and there's large satisfaction with how that's getting done, then I'm okay with something like a 4-day work week, and I wouldn't be overly prescriptive about that. But if it's not getting done with a 4-day work week, then we need to have a conversation.
All right, Ms. Newman.
It is my understanding that the 4-day work week has become something of a success. The employees are happy, residents are happy with the expanded hours that are from Monday through Thursday, and we have significantly increased our ability to process transactions online. The 4-day work week is a misnomer. Not all departments are 4 days. There are some departments, including Public Works and others that are there. So I don't see that it has been a problem. It's been going on for about a year now, and so far it's working well.
Mr. Burke?
Often when I was on the Board of Education, we were going through the budget process, we were looking at teaching workloads and how efficient teachers were working a certain amount of hours a day, a certain amount of classes a day. I think this is somewhat of a similar analysis. If the work is getting done and you have good morale on a 4-day work week and the town taxpayers are getting their full measure of services on a 4-day work week, then I see no reason why not to continue that. But you have to study that and make that judgment.
All right, anything further on that? Fine. All right, thank you. Can I have a time check, please, for all 4 candidates? All right. All right, thank you. Next question will go to Mr. Zagrodsky first. How would you spend the $6.2 million ARPA funding that the town is receiving?
That funding was graciously offered to our town. A lot of other towns have had that as well. We've collected about half of it, I believe, that's sitting in the bank now. The other half is yet to come. I think the proposal to put together a committee of elected officials as well as town citizens to sort through the various options for how to spend that money is exactly the right way to go. There's a list of things we could spend it on, from helping businesses to maybe flood mitigation to other COVID-related damages or issues that they've had. Lots of different ways to address that. I think the best way to address it, though, is to bring together a group of people in a very transparent way to assess those options and come to a consensus as to what they would recommend to the Board of Selectmen. The amount of money is too large and the number of needs are too great, I think, for any one small group to make that decision alone.
Ms. Newman?
The ARPA funds can be used to invest in, quote, water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, and I can't think of a shortage in Darien of the needs in those areas given our past experience with flooding. Public input is vitally important in decisions, and Darien faces immediate flooding issues which have impacted the health and safety of so many of our businesses and residents. They've reached out to us by the dozens, by phone and email and public comment, asking for solutions. We need to support them.
Mr. Burke.
I agree with Mr. Zagorowski that it should be a community conversation and we should bring all the stakeholders together. But sitting here today, I can't see any greater need than flood mitigation. I'm always prepared to have my mind changed by facts and science and good argument, persuasive argument. But sitting here today, it's got to be flood mitigation.
Ms. Minnick?
Sure. I echo what John said. I believe that this is a community conversation. I believe that there are many things that the town of Darien could be using the ARPA fund for. Certainly flood mitigation is on the top of that list, but we can't make that decision without the input of a committee and without the input of the Darien residents.
Okay, anything further on that? Thank you. Next question starts with Ms. Newman, and it was touched on before. Do you think the board can do anything to help the Darien police in convincing more residents to lock their cars and take their keys to prevent car theft?
You're asking if I think there are ways to help the Darien police, help our residents keep their cars locked. Suggesting to take away the residents' keys, no, I don't think that's a good suggestion. I think so many residents in this town have been affected by this issue. Just the other day, a good friend had her car stolen. It's terrifying to think that people are coming into this town, into our yards, into our personal space, and taking belongings. There are residents who repeatedly leave keys in cars, large amounts of cash and belongings, and it's terrible that someone is coming and taking your car. But there are folks who you leave it unlocked one night. The difficulty is that some of us are now going to bed scared, right? There are people now coming in. We've had all kinds of rumors about things that have happened recently. I know that there's a large focus on the individuals that maybe have perpetrated this. I do think we need to work together as a town. We need to come together and figure out the solution, because we are a town that has vehicles that are often left in driveways of zoning. Not everyone has a 2 or 3 car garage for these vehicles. We need to figure out some solutions, but taking keys away from people, no, I don't think that's a good idea. But we do need to work with our residents and figure out what are some solutions.
Mr. Burke.
It is a difficult problem, and it requires effective communication. I understand that in our town budget, we have a slot for a communications position. I don't understand why that has not been filled, but perhaps with the new administration it would be filled. And one of the first things that they could do is work with the police and develop an effective communication strategy with our citizens and help them through this problem.
Ms. Minnick?
Certainly there's a personal accountability that we all have of locking our cars, keeping our doors safe. So taking away the keys as a police officer seems a little outrageous. One of the things that I consider when I think about why and how this continuously keeps happening, Darien obviously is an incredibly safe town, and we would like to keep it that way. Certainly supporting our police department and making sure that they have all the resources that they need to make sure that these perpetrators are not able to come into our town, however that may be. Neighborhood watches could be, a campaign that we can try to use, and certainly keeping people accountable for poor choices.
Mr. Zagorowski.
Not an easy problem. As I said before, there's been a public, visible campaign to try and raise awareness on this. Going out and spending money to hire a communications director hardly seems like a good use of funds if that's going to be the focus. I do think, though, that in addition to simply continuing the awareness campaign, is that we need to understand a lot why this has gotten worse, right? Car thefts are up all over the state of Connecticut. A lot of these kids come into town that are perpetrating this, and they're juveniles, and therefore they can't have police records. I've heard one comment where a kid was detained and told the officer after he'd been detained many times before, I guess I'll see you tomorrow night, right? So this is going on, and it's being perpetrated from outside our town. I think in addition to continuing to build awareness about this particular problem, we should be reaching out to other towns to try and collaborate with them, to try and identify sources of these problems and reach out and cooperate with those towns to try and reduce the incidence of all this. But it's going to require a statewide solution because this problem is not just here in Darien, it's in lots of places.
All right, is there anything? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Burke.
And while we're on a crime issue, I mean, I want to take this opportunity to thank our police. They work extraordinarily hard. We see them all the time out, whether it's at sporting events or helping with traffic or responding so quickly and effectively to our safety issues when they pop up. I think it's among our best tax dollars spent for the police. I was proud to vote for, it was mentioned in the earlier debate, I was proud to vote for the increase in remodeling of the police department when I was on the RTM, and I thank them for their service.
Yes, go ahead. Ms. Newman?
I believe the statement Mr. Zagrodzky made that having a communications director is a poor use of funds is unfortunate. Communication is key, and knowledge is incredibly important to our residents as they drive around town. I propose this position for Town Hall, and I believe that that position will fill the gap. The position was approved for this fiscal year, but I haven't seen the position appear yet. I foresee this position working with all town departments, including the police, especially the planning and zoning and building departments, to get out to our residents the information they need.
All right, anything further on this? All right, thank you. This is going to be the last question before closing statements, and it will go to Mr. Burke first. What should the Board of Selectmen do about the maintenance of the town's beaches and parks?
We have as was mentioned before, we have a very finite amount of park space left, and we should do all we can to maintain it. Those who suggest that there should be abundant additional housing, there may be opportunities for that, but certainly not within our park space. And we need to again, be in conversation with our entire community on this issue. And if I'm elected to the Board of Selectmen, I will certainly look to preserve our park space.
Ms. Minnick.
As Mrs. McNally had mentioned earlier, our beaches and our parks are our crown jewels. Certainly during COVID, they were stretched to their capacity as town residents used this outside space to get out and leave the shelter of their home. Certainly, I don't believe that we had a plan for the kind of capacity that they saw over the 18 months. Going forward, it's definitely something that we need to reevaluate. Having 3 children, I was down at Weed Beach quite frequently, and I know that there was certainly an issue with trash and lots of things that we would find on the beach that certainly are not environmentally friendly, and nobody wants to see 17 pizza boxes piled up on the top of the beach. So reaching out to the Park and Rec and making sure that we have a really solid plan for the increase that has happened as a result of COVID, I think is certainly something that the Board of Selectmen needs to focus on.
Mr. Zagrodzky.
I think I said all I needed to say when we talked about protecting green spaces. I think they need to be maintained, and we need to have professional staff do that. I would take a moment, though, to correct something that was mentioned in the prior debate about the FOIA issue. I was on the receiving end of all that, and I need to set the record straight. The Board of Finance launched an effort to try and understand the differences between how money being spent by the Board of Education and how it was budgeted. And we requested information to try to understand the transfers that were being made as part of our assessment of how spending was going on in town. So that request was refused. We tried repeatedly to get the information. It was discussed at length by the Board of Education. It was discussed at the Board of Education retreat. It was brought before the Board of Education's attorneys. It went on for quite some time. Finally, the education attorney said that the Board of Education was required to turn over that information. My understanding is it took about 5 minutes for the staff to pull that together, and that afterwards our request was branded as a Freedom of Information Act request. The reality is that we're all elected officials, we're all working in the same town, and the idea that we had to go through as a Board of Finance that much time and effort to get a simple request done that was not confidential information is frankly outrageous, right? And so when Ms. Ockman talks about transparency and openness and collaboration, I do not know her well personally, but I can tell you that in our elected official capacity in my dealing on that particular issue, it was not transparent, it was not collaborative, and taxpayer dollars were spent trying to get legal counsel on something that should have been provided to us without any question. If we're going to get to town government that is collaborative and that works together, this type of thing can't go on. That's part of the reason that I'm in this race, is to make sure that that doesn't continue.
All right.
Can you repeat the question? I think we strayed from the original topic.
She asked for a repeat of the question because it was
Yes.
straying from the topic.
The question was, what should the Board of Selectmen do about the maintenance of town beaches and parks?
I am very proud to have seen the amount of work that our Parks and Rec Department and all of Public Works to do over the past 18 months. The incredible use, as Ms. Minnick mentioned, of our residents for the beaches and the parks was a huge gift for our residents during COVID. I think we just need to continue making sure we maintain. Right now, Pear Tree Beach, yes, there's some concern over the building project, but there is site work that needs to be done, and I think we can do that. We need to make sure that we're making sure that that place is as usable as possible, and fixing the boat ramp and fixing the flooding issue with the parking lot, but also making sure the beaches themselves are in great shape for our residents to enjoy every single day.
All right, rebuttal, extension, Mr. Burke.
Rebuttal to Mr. Zagroski's comment. I sat on the Board of Education when those requests came through. I can tell you that the Board of Education is the most transparent body of people in this town, Republicans and Democrats, the 9 of us. All of our meetings are in public. Every single cent that is spent, every single dollar that is proposed is vetted and discussed in public amongst ourselves and with administrators long before it gets to the Board of Selectmen where Mr. Zagroski sat. So I feel his remarks were offensive. I think they were tailored to attack our candidate for first selectman because she was chair of a very successful Board of Education that had our schools at the top of the state and among the top of the nation. And again, the Freedom of Information Act is a great tool. It allows for the free exchange of ideas and documents. There's nothing to suggest any kind of obfuscation when you make a FOIA request. I mean, it's basic government 101, and to insinuate that it's a problem because someone has to FOIA a document, to me, shows a rank misunderstanding of how government works.
Anything further? Mr. Zagrodsky.
I'm quite aware of what the Freedom of Information Act provides. This has nothing to do with that. This had everything to do with the Board of Finance having a legitimate request for available data that was not confidential to support an analysis that the Board of Finance wanted to conduct on behalf of the taxpayers of this town. And we had to fight the Board of Education to get that information. Again, we're talking about collaboration, transparency, openness of debate. I don't doubt that all of their meetings were done in public, just like all of my meetings are done in public. All of this is on tape if anybody doubts it and wants to go take a look at it. I'm just telling you right now that that was not an example of the type of transparency we should have in government. And that's why I brought it up this evening. I only brought it up because the record was not straight from the prior debate.
All right, anything further? At this point, we are in closing statements, and by luck of the draw, the first close will be Ms. Minnick's.
Again, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for their efforts tonight. As someone who's helped facilitate this event the past 2 election cycles, I know the work that goes into planning, and I am truly grateful for your efforts on educating our voters. I hope I've answered many of your questions, and when you walk away from tonight with a good sense of who I am as a leader and what my values and skills with my team will bring to the Board of Selectmen. I will just highlight what I believe to be my greatest asset to this board. I am a small business owner. I am the only small business owner on this ticket. Like so many of you, I understand the threat that policies have brought to our businesses and our futures here in Connecticut. My job as a member of the Board of Selectmen is to insulate Darien from those threats, as well as support the many of you as we navigate the difficult challenges of an ever-changing business climate. I know how important local government decisions affect our small businesses, and I promise you, I will listen and I will fight for your success. Tonight, I ask for your vote on November 2nd, along with my teammates John Zagroski and Monica McNally. We are the team to keep Darien the beautiful and desirable town you choose and the future you can trust. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zagrodsky.
I didn't mean to be negative tonight. I'm actually in a very good mood. This is a great forum, and I really appreciate the chance to be here. I'll close by just having a shout out for the team of McNally, Zagrodsky, and Minnick. We decided to run as a team because we have very complementary backgrounds. Monica has a tremendous background on the RTM and years of service in the town and work as a financial advisor. I've gotten to know her well as part of this campaign. She's terrific and I think deserves everyone's support. Marcy's role in town as a mom and a volunteer and previous candidate for office, as well as a CEO of her own business, fantastic. And well, you know who I am. But I think the combination of those three is really unbeatable. And I would urge everyone to think carefully in this election. We would collectively, all three of us, very much appreciate your support on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Newman.
In closing, I would like to again thank the League of Women Voters in Darien for holding this event. Darien and her residents inspire me every day. I have very much enjoyed working with all of our Darien residents during my term. Getting to meet so many and working with them to solve our community challenges have made my service on this board an honor and privilege. Going forward, I believe strongly that Darien needs to focus on solutions to the extensive floating issues. Residents have opened their wallets to live here, and now it is time we need to work for them. In addition, I look forward to continuing with the different boards and commissions in our town to give our residents the best parks and programs that residents will enjoy. I ask that you re-elect me to Darien's Board of Selectmen. I appreciate your support, and I look forward to continuing the work with you.
Thank you. Mr. Burke.
Last Friday, when en route to Parents' Weekend for my son Matthew at Providence College via Amtrak, I found myself mesmerized by our magnificent coastline. I was also struck by an overwhelming feeling of gratitude. Gratitude for the wonderful lives our sons have had growing up here. Gratitude for all of the volunteers with whom I have worked. Gratitude for the abundant resources in Darien and that it is a community that cares so deeply about all of her citizens. I was also overcome by a sense of duty. Duty to give back to this jewel of a community in a larger way as a selectman. Duty to ensure we meet the challenges of today and plan for a better future for all residents. Duty to make sure that all of our citizens feel as blessed as I do. Elect me to this board, and I will do what I have always done since my first day on the RTM, and that is use every skill I possess and work with everyone in sight to do the very best for this place we call home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the candidates on behalf of the League. Yes. It's that, yeah. Worm first, best second, Brown third, and PA fourth. Yes, Worm first. We got Julie Best second. And then
did they do it like that?
David Brown.
Yeah, I didn't know that that's...
Oh, here, I think we should shift down.
I thought we sit in our order, maybe I'm wrong.
But yeah, you do. You start 1, 2, 3, 4.
From the numbers we picked, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so it's Ms. Worm,
Thank you.
Ms. Best,
That's, I believe so, Dave, you're 3, is that
Mr.
correct?
Brown,
Yep.
Look, I got a little family pad.
and then Stacy TA.
Stacy's down. Talk the microphone.
Pardon, you get it first.
I've got a bad spot. I'm like in a, here. I've got like a, yeah, there we go. See, I specifically wear pants because someone said they can see up your skirt.
Yes, and now it's
And then
not
they
an
covered it up and it wasn't an issue.
But last time, I believe that was the case.
One of those questions which you never know. Okay. Oh, gotcha.
And I don't know.
I don't know either. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen who are watching and who are here, the rules for this debate are exactly the same as they were for the prior two. Will the timer for Ms. Worm, please, yep, and for Ms. Best, and for Mr. Brown, and for Ms. TA. All right, so you know who your timers are. Opening statements start with Ms. Worm.
Good evening, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for this important event. I am Tara Worm, and my family and I have been living in Darien for 14 years. My 2 children have had the privilege of attending Darien Public Schools. As a mother, past PTO chair, past DAAG co-president, and current RTM Education Committee member, I've seen firsthand the impact the pandemic has had on our students. The Thriving Youth Task Force survey, which was recently presented at the BOE, showed 69% of our students fall into a category experiencing sadness, loneliness, and anxiety. I've always been passionate about our students' education, but if our students are not mentally healthy, they cannot fully access everything that Darien has to offer. My current pursuit of my master's in clinical mental health counseling will be critical in decision-making and how best to support students and staff. And finally, my background in finance, along with having served on the budget rep for both middle and high school, will support the budget process. I believe the combination of my professional background, volunteer experience, and my current degree pursuit make me a clear choice for the Board of Education.
Thank you. Ms. Best?
Yes.
I'll slide closer. Good evening. I'm Julie Best. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, TV 79, and all the volunteers here making tonight possible. My husband and I have been in town for 12 years, and we have 3 daughters who are all in the Darien Public Schools. I've been a volunteer in Darien Public School-related roles for over 10 years. I spent the last 3 years as a co-chair of the Council of Darien School Parents, working closely with the administration, the Board of Education, and the PTOs from all 7 schools. I've traveled to Hartford twice, in 2019 and 2020, to fight to maintain local control of our schools. I spent a year and a half serving on the committee that developed the recently adopted 5-year strategic plan for the district. I volunteered weekly at the town vaccine clinic last winter and spring. I spent 10 years working in advertising and communications, and I have a degree in psychology from Georgetown University. I am ready, willing, and able to serve on the Board of Education and to focus on our children and our schools.
Mr. Brown?
Good evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event and inviting me. I would like to say I'm very proud to have been renominated to serve a second term on the Darien Board of Education. I'm proud of the work I've done in my first term, such as the recently approved curriculum committee being able to move that forward, and the long overdue work to replace the portables at our elementary schools. I'm also looking forward to the challenges we'll face as we move forward, such as integrating our technology platform underneath our curriculum and working to remediate the core learning that's necessary for our students that they've suffered in the COVID crisis. The one thing I've learned over the board, as I said in my first interview here, I had a lot to learn. I believe I have learned a lot, but the most important thing I've learned is the value of teamwork. We're all equal on the board. We're all members. So it's great to have a running mate who brings a clinical, deep understanding of children's mental health. I look forward to running with her and serving with her on the board. I think that's a terrific and valuable addition. Thank you.
Ms. TA?
My name is Stacy T.A. I want to thank the League, TV 79, and the volunteers for organizing this event tonight. My husband and I moved to Darien in 2012 with our 2 kids, who we enrolled in Darien Public Schools starting at ELP. Since then, I have been a dedicated volunteer in our town, organizing events such as the 4th of July fireworks, the Library Gala, and Candidates Night, and most recently serving weekly at the vaccine clinic. I've held leadership roles on the Council of Darien School Parents and Darien Advocates of the Education of the Gifted. And for the past 6 years, I have served on the RTM's Finance and Budget Committee, where we worked hard to shape the town's budgets that are fiscally responsible, yet keeping our schools high-performing. I have a degree in business finance. I have a proven record of experience needed for Board of Ed. And as a professional child advocate who does not take clients in Darien, I understand intimately what the school districts across the state are facing. And I know that there is a tremendous amount of work to be done supporting the needs of all learners.
Okay, thank you all. First question starts with Ms. Best. What is your position on maintaining masks for students and staff in Darien schools?
I think there are 2 things everyone can agree on. Nobody wants our kids to have to wear masks, and everybody believes that in-person school is better. As of right now, the mask mandate is in place from the state until February 15th. So until February 15th, all individuals inside school buildings are required to be masked at all times. If that is going to change come February 15th and come to the state, I would encourage the board and the administration to consider the the advice of our local health experts, as they have done throughout the pandemic very successfully, and follow the science, follow the concerns of the parents, the staff, the faculty, and listen to the voice of the administration and the experts. In the meantime, I think what we could spend time doing on the Board of Education is talking about the impacts that children are suffering as a result of mask wearing. There are kids who are having issues with socializing, literacy. There are a number of ways that we can provide supports to help kids work through this experience while they're still forced to wear masks.
Mr. Brown.
I think that the mask wearing, again, as was mentioned, is out of our control for the time being. I think that the decision needs to be based on the data. It needs to be based on what's happening with kids, how are they contracting it, how many are getting sick. I haven't seen that data to date from our town because we haven't had the opportunity to find out. I think that it's very important that we focus on remediation. I think our students were out of school for far too long. I think, unfortunately, we're not prepared technology-wise to have the backup and be able to give our kids what they needed when COVID began. I think it's very important that we improve that. And I think the most important thing, especially for our youngest learners, is give them the chance to have one-on-one, face-to-face conversation, learning opportunities with their teachers and their peers. Thank you.
Ms. Tia?
As my running mate Julie Best said, we all want to remove the masks. That is the ultimate goal. That is where we share common ground. The priority is to keep our kids in school as much as possible and as safely as possible. As has also been mentioned, the mask mandate is in place until February 15th. Therefore, it's out of our control. This summer, when I listened to the Board of Ed debate masks mandates, they already knew that the mask mandate was in place until September 30th. And yet they continued to spend time fighting over whether masks should be a home choice or a mask mandate. Instead, they should have focused on making sure that the staff and the schools were prepared to welcome the children where they were when they entered the building. I listened to parents talk about their concerns of the impact of mask wearing. They talked about literacy concerns, social skills concerns, mental health. As an advocate, I heard them. And when I hear social skills and I hear literacy and I hear mental health, I think of psychologists, I think of speech and language pathologists. Speech and language pathologists play a huge role in social skills and literacy because they study whether the kids' receptive and expressive language. And I think I was disappointed that the board spent time fighting over whether to fight the state about mask mandates and didn't focus their time on making sure we had the resources the kids needed when they entered the school building.
All right, same question, Ms. Worm.
As everyone has stated, at the moment,
with Lamont's executive orders, we have no choice but masks. Those executive orders are up in February. We will see if he then re-ups again. So I would say one of our first things is if we have an issue with local control, we need to go to the state and make sure our people are voting for us and looking for local control to get rid of those executive orders. I've spoken to many people that are unhappy about the masks, especially the ones with the youngest learners, the most vulnerable. And I agree with what the Board of Ed recently asked Lamont for. There was a recent vote. They wrote a letter unanimously asking for local control so that we can look at our numbers along with our local health authorities to make the best decisions for our town. And I would agree with that. Once Lamont releases his executive orders, that we should have local control to make what's the best decision for our town.
Okay, rebuttal? Mr. Brown.
Hi, thank you. I think transparency is a very important thing for the Board of Education to explain to our voters, to our constituents, where decisions are made. People come to us and ask for our help. We can't always give it to them. It's not in our power. Sometimes they have to go to Hartford. Sometimes they have to go to their teacher. We're an important guidepost to help them find solutions to their problems. I think discussions that we have, putting that information out to the public, being transparent, pointing out that something like a mask sits in Hartford, not with us, taking the step to actually put a letter out to Hartford expressing the views of our constituents is very important work. I think that's what local control is and what local control looks like. I don't see how that could possibly be a waste of time. That's what we're for. That's why we're elected to represent you. It's a very important work we do, and I look forward to doing it again in my next term. Thank you.
Yes. Ms. Dier.
Again, you're on the Board of Education. The Board of Education serves children. The board is supposed to be there to make sure the schools are ready to open for children. And I agree that we need to make sure that constituents understand mandates and what they can do and that they can participate in government, but we also need to make sure that the schools are ready for children where they are.
Anything further? All right, this is going to be a related question, and it's going to start with Mr. Brown. Do you support vaccine mandates in Darien schools, and who should decide?
I think medical decisions should be between an individual and their doctor, and in this case for our children it should be between the parents and their medical provider. I don't see there's any role for the Board of Education to mandate any type of vaccination.
Ms. Yeh?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Do you support vaccine mandates in Darien schools, and who should decide?
I think that the decision whether to vaccinate your child should be up to you and your medical professional. However, I think it is important to remember that we have a responsibility as a community to each other and to take care of each other and make sure that we are safe and looking out for each other. So I think as a Board of Ed member, if it were up to a Board of Ed, which I don't foresee that being a Board of Ed decision, once again, we would have to listen to our local health professionals who have guided us through this pandemic safely so far.
All right. Ms. Worm.
So vaccine mandates, would never be something that would come down to the Board of Education. That would be something that would be coming down from the state. That being said, it is a complicated issue. Herd immunity is important for all of our kids, and particularly those that are medically more complicated. We all have our individual health profiles, and we need to make sure that everyone is able to accommodate their individual needs, and I believe those needs should be private.
All right. Ms. Best.
Thank you. I would agree that this is not a decision that would lay in the hands of the Board of Education. I would say that, yes, it's a decision to be made with families and their medical experts or at the state level. But I do think it's a good time to remember that public school systems are only as safe as the most vulnerable among them. So we have a responsibility as a public school system to take care of each and every one of our children, those who can't get vaccinated and those who perhaps need to be vaccinated. But again, a decision to be made elsewhere.
All right, anything further on this? Thank you. The next question is going to start with Ms. Thier. What role do you think parents should have with respect to curriculum development in the Darien public school system? What would you say to parents who have expressed concerns about curriculum at DHS and MMS? And would you support a change in policy or practice to help restore and/or ensure a sense of collaboration between parents and administration?
That was a long question. Could you repeat that?
Certainly. What role do you think parents should have with respect to curriculum development in the Darien public school system? What would you say to parents who have expressed concerns about curriculum at DHS and MMS? Would you support a change in policy or practice to help restore and/or ensure a sense of collaboration between parents and administration?
First, I'd like to say that I think the parents' role is important in their child's education. I think it's important that parents give their feedback to their teachers and the Board of Education and the superintendent. I think they should ask their questions, and I think they should voice their concerns. I think first, it's important for parents to follow the chain of communication. First, you talk to your teacher. Then, if you don't get the answer you need, or you still have questions and concerns, then you go to the department chair of that area of study, and then you keep going up the chain. The Board of Ed also has a public comment both at the beginning and the end of their meetings, and you can also email the board and the superintendent at any time.
All right, Ms. Worm?
Yes. So I'm very familiar with this. As we know, there has been some uproar in the community over some recent things that have gone on at the schools. They started actually last year, a couple of years ago. There have been things brought to the board that have fallen flat, that no one has spoken about. So when people have looked and said that parents didn't go through the chain of command, it is because they have been ignored for so long. I believe in more board oversight. I am happy to see that the curriculum committee was reestablished the other night at the Board of Ed. There needs to be transparency and accountability. And that can only be done by bringing parents in and allowing them to see what is being taught to their children.
All right, Ms. Best.
I'll echo what Ms. TA said, that parent input is always important, and parents should always have an opportunity to weigh in and share their thoughts and their feedback. I understand that the curriculum subcommittee is being created again. There has been one in the past, and I look forward to learning more about how that's going to come together, how it will work, what the work product will be. It's quite vague at this time, although it's my general understanding that the idea is to have greater transparency and also to have an opportunity for the board to be a bit more involved in curriculum. I think we've heard the district say that in these times, in the last year and a half of sort of a catch-as-catch-can approach to life all around the world, it's been hard to do the regular updates that have typically been part of the board and administration calendar. I think it's important to remember that we have a tremendous asset in our school district, which are our experienced and very educated teaching professionals. So I don't want to see anything put in place that could limit their involvement in the creating and delivering of our curriculum in a responsible and appropriate way, of course. There's been much discussion about the importance of professional development for teachers, and I think that's always the case, and that needs to continue. And I think that we need to make sure that we have the right people in the right rooms having the conversations about what our curriculum looks like for our kids.
Mr. Brown?
So the question, should parents be involved in their children's curriculum? Of course. Parents are the most important part in their children's curriculum. They're the most important part of their children's learning. Darien has great schools because of the virtuous cycle that exists here. We have great schools which attract great parents who are interested in their children's learning. Parents go out of their way to choose Darien because of the great schools. It's the commitment, involvement, dedication, and realization that education is crucial to their children's development and learning that helps the Darien schools thrive. Yes, we have great teachers, we have great staff, but it's that dedication, it's that effort, it's that hard work by parents to find the best for their children that really makes Darien thrive. Should Darien's parents have a role in their curriculum? Of course they should. We're very fortunate to have this virtuous circle. We need to continue it. Darien is the #1 high school in the state. Let's go higher than that. Let's make the school system the best in the state. Why not the best in the country? With the parents and a curriculum that reflects the values of these parents who are dedicated to their children's education, that's something we can work towards. I look forward to doing so in my next term. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, rebuttal?
Sorry.
So I just wanted to echo quickly what Dave mentioned about the values, and I think that is the issue here. We are not looking to limit teachers' creativity. We just want to make sure that when the kids come to school, those values that are being taught at home aren't diminished when they walk through the doors. We think that teachers and parents should be partnering together to have a holistic approach to the child. And that's what we are, we just want more accountability and transparency when it comes to the curriculum.
All right, anything further on parental involvement? All right, next question starts with Ms. Worm, and it's somewhat related.
Okay.
What do you feel is the best way to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools? Please explain your position. Specifically, how would you measure success over time as it relates to the district's DEI agenda?
Okay, well, I strongly believe in diversity, equal opportunity, and inclusion. The issue is equity. It's unclear and a bit subjective. There's a difference between equal opportunity and equity of outcome. When we talk about equity of outcome, we need to have a clear discussion in our community about what this looks like and how we're going to use this in our schools. Now, obviously, we've had some issues recently, and not even so recently. They've been coming up, so obviously there needs to be more education in our schools. How we are going to measure that success, that is going to be, I think, just by seeing the growth within our students of them being more inclusive of others.
All right, Ms. Best.
Ms. Rabineau, could you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. What do you feel is the best way to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools? Please explain your position. Specifically, how would you measure success over time as it relates to the district's DEI agenda?
Thank you. I would start probably by echoing where Ms. Worm just left off, which is I think that we can measure our success by having fewer and fewer, and preferably none of the incidents that we've seen of late, and also in the last few years. I think we'd like to eradicate those entirely. I think the district has put together a really strong 5-year strategic plan, and as an accompanying document, the vision of the graduate. And these two items together help create a roadmap and create context for the kind of humans that we're trying to create here in our district. And they call for some rather serious diversity, equity, and inclusion work to be done here in the district. I think it's critical that that work needs to be done beyond just the schools. I think it's a community responsibility. The same conversations need to be happening at home at the dinner table that are happening in the schools. And I think that we need to support the district and work with the town, honestly, to make all of that happen. I worked on the strategic plan. We had a lot of great discussions about what success should look like in the future for our students. And we need our kids to be ready to go out into the world that's bigger and broader than Darien. And so I think it's really critical.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. I think that it was important to have a strategic plan in place that considered all of our learners, and I think we'll measure success by being able to have equal opportunity to each of our students, provide them the resources they need to thrive, and be able to measure their performance over time. I think that I look forward to seeing how this is implemented, to learning more about it. I think it's important that we have the curriculum committee involved, because if we are going to be teaching anything to our students as per statute, that is something that would be curriculum, and that needs to be vetted, and that needs to be done in a proper manner, and that needs to be done in the committee's work. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Thier?
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. What do you feel is the best way to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools? Please explain your position. Specifically, how would you measure success over time as it relates to the district's DEI agenda?
Once again, I'm going to agree with my running mate, Julie Best. I think the recent events that have happened at DHS and at the middle school in years past prove the need for a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in our school system. I agree that the conversation needs to be collaborative at school and at home at the home dinner table. The strategic plan lays out specifically 7 goals, and in those 7 goals, they talk about how they're going to measure the success of the initiative of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Plan. So I think this district is also forming a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion subcommittee. So I think I look forward to hearing about that committee and how it's going to work, and I think we'll see a lot of outcomes from that.
Thank you. Anybody want to extend a rebut on this one? Thank you all. The next one will start with Ms. Best. Please state your position on a later start for high school students, as in Greenwich and soon New Canaan, along with other districts, and what do you see as the advantages of your position?
So yes, I understand that Greenwich has had this in place for some time. New Canaan, I believe, is hoping to do it by the end of the year. I think Wilton has a later start time for their high schools. I think there are a lot of reasons it makes sense. There's a lot of great research that teenagers specifically do better with more sleep and sleeping later in the day. There are a lot of logistical challenges. There's the buses to consider. I think New Canaan's looking at least $1 million price tag for the adjustments they need to make in their busing schedule to accommodate the change in start times. There's field time. There is after-school extracurricular activities outside of athletics. There are a whole number of things that have to get reshifted, not to mention you have to adjust likely the middle school and the elementary schools as well. So it's a big upheaval, so it can't be done lightly for sure. It could be suggested that we'll be forced to make some changes if all the towns that we compete against and participate in other activities with are on a different schedule than we are. We're not going to be able to meet them at the times they need to meet us, so that might force our hand. All that said, I don't know the answer right now. I think it's something that would need to be weighed in on by the community, by the parents, and by the educational professionals, but I definitely think that it's a conversation we should have, and I would be looking forward to having it.
Mr. Brown.
Oh, thanks. I know with 2 high schoolers, it would make my life a lot easier to have a later start time. As a matter for the Board of Education, I mean, we'd have to do the work, we'd have to do the research. So sitting here, I can't say one way or the other. What I do think is important if we do look at the issue is we should do it in a very detailed way. We should look at the data, we should look at the information. We should look at what success looks like so we know how to measure. We're an oversight board, and that's what we do. We're not an advocacy board. It's not very exciting sometimes, but that's what we do. We set goals, we set policies, and we measure the success of the implementation, or if there's gaps, we find ways to try and improve. That's what our role is. I think that looking at what we have for challenges in terms of what's happened to our learners, looking at where there's gaps, looking at where we need to provide remediation in core subjects such as mathematics, English, language arts, that's really where we need to be focused right now after COVID. Something like this, sure, we should take a look, but I don't think it's a day one priority. Thank you.
Ms. Thier?
I've actually heard this from several parents that they would like to see this brought up at the board table as an agenda item. So I will echo Mrs. Best that I think it's something that we have to do a lot of research on. I think there is a lot of science behind adolescent sleep patterns, that they sleep later. I agree with Ms. Best that if our surrounding communities and our DIRG are pushing their times, that it'll affect our field times and our after-school activity times. So we will need to look at that. We definitely need to look at the financial impact of moving the start times.
All right, Ms. Worm?
Okay, this looks like one question that we are all in complete agreement on. Obviously, we have all seen the science. Yes, teenagers go to bed later. Their internal clocks change. They go to bed later, they sleep later. It is difficult for them getting up so early. But we do have a town of athletes that have, not just athletes, theater, music, they all have activities. Our extracurriculars are off the charts. So they're busy kids. So there is a lot to take into consideration, and I think, yes, that would have to be a serious board conversation, but I also think that's a conversation with parents and the students. Remember, these are our high school students. They're smart. They have a lot of opinions. And see what they think is best for them. And I think it would be a mixed bag, but I think it's important to ask them what they want. They should have some control over this. In all that's gone on with them for the past, how many years now we are in this pandemic, they have lost more control than anyone else. And that has definitely been a huge detriment to their mental health that we're seeing. So yes, this is a big conversation. Yes, we should all take it seriously, and I think we all do, and we all want what's best for our students, but let's talk to everyone in the community.
All right, yes.
I just wanted to say that Ms. Worm brought up a very good point about student having a voice, and that's one of the things I'm excited about, that the Board of Ed is talking about adding student representation onto their board.
All right, anything further on school start time? All right, next question starts with Mr. Brown. What excites you about the district's strategic plan, and how do you think you can best help move the district forward?
I think the strategic plan is exciting in a number of aspects. It's great that we have a roadmap to follow going forward. I know we've had a number of initiatives over the year where we've sort of had a project or two that's come along from an administration. I think it was great that we had a very thoughtful process that took place here. It was very well thought out. It's comprehensive and it goes forward over a number of years. Gives us a benchmark to measure against. I think that in terms of technology, that is one that is of great excitement. I think that now, perhaps this wasn't in mind when the plan was figured out, but having curriculum, having taken center stage, I think that integrating technology into curriculum makes sense. I mean, I can remember way back when, as just reading the paper and wondering why, when my 3-year-old knows how to use an iPad, and I think a lot of people's kids, youngsters know how to use iPads. We were giving them out to high schoolers. Just things like that didn't make a lot of sense. I think technology needs to be comprehensive, needs to free up time for our teachers to do things other than grade homework, gives them time to deal with their students, which is their main job, form those relationships and help educate one-to-one. I think technology could help the administration in terms of tracking. I know now these iPads that the students have, I hear from parents that they just sit in their closet for the high schoolers. I usually wouldn't rely on an anecdote, but our technology team can't even track, so that's the best data we have are these anecdotes. So I think that having a roadmap in place is great. I think that being able to execute on that over the next few years is terrific. I'm hoping there's nothing provocative. I think it should be a plan to help us better educate our kids and do that in a more efficient way and allow our teachers to focus on their main job, which is educating kids. Thank you.
Ms. Ye?
Julie and I were honored to work with a fantastic group of stakeholders on the Strategic Planning Committee. We spent several months working together to help develop the plan that has recently been adopted by the Board of Education. I enjoyed working with the various stakeholders to identify what we felt our district's needs and areas of opportunities were. Specifically, I worked on a subcommittee that focused on operations and systems of the district. On my committee, there was teachers, and we spent a lot, I listened to the teachers that they talked about how they don't have a chain of communication for themselves, and that they would like more time to be able to work together to plan. And recently, at a Board of Education meeting on September 14th, Dr. Adley echoed that he would like to have more opportunity for teachers to have planning time together. As a committee, we came up with a mission, and our vision, and our core values for the district, along with the 7 goals I mentioned. This plan, in conjunction with the vision of the graduate, focuses on the development of a whole child. I am so passionate about the development of a whole child that I have named my business Whole Child Advocates. I believe Julie and I have the experience working with this committee, puts us in a strong position as board members to implement the strategic plan.
Yes, okay. So I think long-term planning is always something we've been asking for. So it was great to see that the Board of Ed worked on this strategic plan. I was not on the strategic planning committee, but I know a lot of people that were, and there was a lot of thoughtful work that went into it. I'm thrilled that there is a roadmap for the Board of Ed to be working with for the next few years. The vision of the graduate, I think, is one of the most important things in there. You know, they are starting to, at the high school, no longer just when they invite in colleges, they're looking at other options, right? Because a 4-year college is not always the way every student is going to go. So we're opening up things to see what does success look like for everyone. Because going to the best school is not successful for everyone. We need to find the right path for each student. And I look forward to being able to work on that.
All right. Ms. Best.
Thank you. A lot of great points have been made already. I won't repeat them. I will just add to the roadmap point. I think it's wonderful that this really thoughtful long-term work is in place and that it was unanimously approved by the Board of Education, which is an endorsement, of course, for the district to now move forward and start putting plans together against this document to then bring to the board and work through the process. But I think it's when everybody has buy-in at that early strategic level that it really frees people up to do their best work, and you can work creatively. You feel supported, you feel challenged at the right times, which helps get you to a better place, but I really think that that's going to serve as an incredible tool for the next 5 years for this district, and I look forward to being a part of that as well. And I'll just offer to Mr. Brown, who I guess is collecting anecdotes, that I have 2 high schoolers who exclusively use their iPads and find them critical and useful. So,
anything further on the strategic plan? All right. Next question starts with Ms. T.A. Would you consider redistricting as a means of accommodating new children possibly moving into town based on new housing developments, as well as the influx of new families to Darien during the pandemic?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes, this is on redistricting. Would you consider redistricting as a means of accommodating new children, possibly moving into town in the new housing developments, as well as the influx of new families to Darien during the COVID pandemic?
Enrollment is something that we always look at. The board, the administration does their own analysis on enrollment projections, as well as uses Malone and McBroom to do projections. Julie and I, as members of the Council of Darien School Parents, were very vocal in these conversations about making sure that the board and the Malone and McBroom consider the developments that are happening in town and the impact on the schools. Our schools are tight, and so we need to make sure that we're very cautious when we do that. I would hope we don't have to redistrict. I think people value their neighborhood schools and their neighborhood elementary schools, so I would hope it wouldn't have to come to that. But I think that the board has to look at these very carefully, and hopefully the plannings for this development and the projections are correct. But already this year, we have 50 more kids in the district than we projected. 43 of them alone went to Ox Ridge. And I know everybody's excited about that new school that we've all advocated really hard for. And I'm excited to see that Hindley and Royal and Holmes are going to get additions and get rid of those portables finally, because that's something that we also have been advocating for a long time. And as the building committee gets formed for those three schools, hopefully that building committee will also be looking closely at enrollment.
Ms. Worm?
Sorry, Sharon. I can't keep track. I think this is one of the reasons why all the boards in town need to work together collaboratively, because we need to know what's going on in each division, each other area, right? Planning and zoning, when new housing is coming up. Yes, people like their local schools, but if one school, some schools are smaller than others, Royal happens to be the smallest school, if some are being overloaded, we may have to look at redistricting. You know, we just always have to look at what is best for the town and all children as a whole. So I don't think we can ever say, no, we're not going to look at that. We always have to keep an open mind and make sure we're looking at what is best for everyone.
Ms. Best.
Thanks. I would agree. We could never say never. I think we have to lay the priorities out. I think tracking enrollment, maintaining small class sizes, which is probably the #1 concern that we hear from parents, certainly in the CDSP world, and keeping a community feel are critical. But if we had to do it, I think those things could be served and maintained with redistricting. So be open to it if it needed to be discussed.
Mr. Brown?
So when I look at the plan of the schools, I think the #1 concern we have to have is what the needs are of our students, and we have to remember the students come first. That's the operating principle that we have at the Darien Board of Education. I know that the middle school was designed with the intention of being able to add on to the back if necessary. I think that sort of smart, thoughtful approach needs to happen in our new projects. I'm very proud to have been part of the board that was able to move forward to get the portables removed after a long struggle, after reluctance from prior boards and some current members, and I'm glad that we were able to get that done, and that work is now proceeding. I think that's very exciting. So in terms of what choices we have, I think we'd have to look at the data, we'd have to look at where the students are, where the need is, and look at our options to respond accordingly. And I think that being able to do that work, being able to push the removal of the portables forward, took a number of members of the board working together as a team, which I think is the most important part of our role. And I think it'd be great to have another teammate together with me to support initiatives like that. Thank you.
All right, any rebuttal or extension?
Yes, please. Thank you. I just want to add that, yes, if we do feel that there could be a need to do something like redistrict or add on to the middle school or whatever it is, I would like the team of the Board of Education and the administration to be able to work quickly and nimbly, because there is not a history of these things happening quickly. As Mr. Brown just mentioned, and I believe Stacy mentioned also, we're hoping to see the portables roll out of town here decades after they should have departed. I have spent years at many a microphone begging to get rid of these portables that had long seen their useful days go by. So let's try to be on top of it, and let's try to act swiftly when we see that there's a need that needs to be addressed.
All right, anything further on this? All right, next question starts with Ms. Worm. What is your reaction to the report issued in June by Teresa Rangel concerning the Gifted and Talented Program, IDEA?
I'm sorry, the report that she did?
Yes, what is your reaction to the report?
Well, it is something we've been asking for many, many years. So we were very happy that they finally did a review of the IDEA program. We think there's some things that came out of that are very exciting. Some things that we have been asking for years as well. There was differentiation at the elementary school when it comes to math, acceleration, possibly something that has been, turned down for many, many years. They are possibly looking at, there has been on the board year after year looking at cutting the Achievers program in 9th grade. So there is some discussion about what is the best time to end that program, or do we open that up to non-IDEA students? Are there students in 9th grade that would like to be part of something like that where they're creating their own projects? So I think it was a very robust dive into the program. We have all been really happy with it, and we look forward to the steering committee that is going to begin in order to move things forward.
Ms. Best.
Yes, I'll echo that this is something that's been a long time coming, and I believe that the report has been well received. I think there's a lot of fertile material in there to explore further. We're lucky that we have a strong gifted program with very dedicated parents and staff to help serve our gifted community, and I think that that's incredibly valuable. So I'm happy to see that that's being given the thought and consideration that it deserves. Of course, we also need to constantly serve all children, so I hope that we are keeping an eye on all the balls, so to speak, to make sure that all the kids in the middle are always getting the attention they deserve as well.
Mr. Brown.
I think it is very important, and our role is to support all of our learners. I think it's great that somebody actually did a study and got the data that we can use to go forward to look at this issue. I think we do need to have opportunities on an equal basis to all of our students to achieve, learn, strive, and be the best students and adults they can be. And I'm very excited that we'll be able to promote learning to this cohort moving forward.
Excuse me. All right. Sorry about that. It gets picked up on the recording. Same question for Ms. Tieh?
I just wanted to say that the last 2 years I've had the pleasure of working with Ms. Worm as the co-advocacy chairs of the Darien Advocates for the Education of the Gifted. It was definitely one of our goals to get the district to review the gifted program, and so it was wonderful to see it done and presented so well. And I would echo that I'm excited to see the initiative, the steering committee, and I look forward to seeing what comes next from that.
All right, anything further on this? Yes?
I just want to add one thing to that. Just one thing, because it was something, we had a meeting last night, and we discussed this in depth, and I have been a part of DAEG on the board in many different ways. I was president at one point, but one of the things that came out of it was how much everyone loved our teachers and how lucky we are to have those amazing gifted teachers. And they felt so supported and so much love. And I just wanted to, in case any of them are watching, to reiterate that once again.
All right, anything further? All right, given the lateness of the hour, I do not think there will be any more questions, and we will go to closing statements. So timers 1 minute each, and we start with Ms. Best.
Thank you again to the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to participate in this debate tonight. One thing I didn't get the opportunity to say earlier is on the subject of local control. This is a question that's come up repeatedly, and it definitely seems clear that the Republicans want you to believe that we don't support local control. So I want to say very clearly that Stacey Tieh and I are both very much in support of local control, and also we do not support regionalization. We have been in Hartford to testify in order to protect for it for our town. On November 2nd, Darien residents should cast their vote for the candidates who are focused on what matters, who have their best interests, the interests of Darien residents, students, parents, and taxpayers, at heart, rather than the interests of a handed-down national agenda that has little to do with our town and our community. We're the candidates who'll focus on our kids, our schools, and our town, as we've done in our volunteer roles for the past 10 years. We will prioritize, not politicize, our children. Please vote for us on November 2nd.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. I would just like to say it's been a privilege serving on the Board of Education for the past almost 3 years. I look forward to serving another term for the next 3. I would like to ask the vote of everyone watching tonight. I hope that you can look at my record and be encouraged that I'll be able to do the same dedicated service over the next 3 years. I would also like to, again, stress the importance of teamwork and ask anyone watching to please be sure to vote for both of us, Tara Worm and myself, the Brown Worm for Board of Education for the next 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kieh?
Thank you again to the League and TV 79. One thing I did not get to mention tonight is I wanted to warn the voters about what the row B signs that will be coming out. They are meant to mislead you and confuse you and trick you into voting. This election is crucial to shaping the future of Darien Public Schools. Every vote matters. Julie and I already know the issues facing the district. We have established positive working relationships with administration, sitting Board of Ed members, other elected officials, members of the public. We can get to work for all Darien residents, students, and staff on day one. Our social media and website, we have laid out our platform that focuses on mental health, health and safety, and fiscal responsibility. On November 2nd, when you go to the polls, you will only get two votes. We want you to cast your 2 votes for Julie Best and me, Stacy T.A.
Thank you. Ms. Worm?
Okay, I feel like I need to add on now. Anyone that knows me knows that I have strong values, opinions, and integrity. I do not take my cues from a national party nor any local boards or parties. I work for the community, and I am accountable to that community. I want to thank everyone that has supported me and believes that I will be a valuable addition to the Board of Education. I'm passionate about education, and I believe our children should be taught how to think and not what to think. I hope that I have expressed that passion to you tonight, and I humbly ask for your vote on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, my profound and our profound thanks to all the candidates. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen who are watching, vote November 2nd.